Hello and welcome to Indus News Live from Islamabad. I'm Hira Mustafa and these are the headlines. India has reported a record high daily surge in COVID-19 infections as over 100,000 people tested positive in a day. Pakistan has registered over 4,300 coronavirus cases and 43 deaths overnight, taking the tally over 14,800. Globally, the virus has claimed 2.8 million lives and infected over 131 million people so far. China has warned the United States not to take a superior position and presume it has a final say on global affairs. In an interview, Foreign Minister Wang Yi said the door for dialogue with Washington is open, but it must be based on equality and mutual respect. He added Beijing will not accept any unilateral demands from Washington. In Myanmar, pro-democracy activists are holding more demonstrations today after killing of 6 protesters at the weekend. The protesters called for more coordinated nationwide dissent, defying the military's moves to suppress their movement. So far, more than 550 people have been killed by security forces since the February 1st coup. The dead toll from flash floods and landslides that hit Indonesia and neighboring East Timor has topped 70. Authorities in Indonesia say 55 people have died and 40 others are still missing in southeastern islands. Meanwhile, the same tropical cyclone has claimed 21 lives in East Timor. Well, these were the headlines. News in detail coming after the short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now the news in detail. India has reported the highest daily cases so far, with more than 100,000 infections overnight. Globally, the virus has claimed 2.8 million lives and infected 131 million others. More in this report.
As many countries are battered with a third wave of COVID-19, experts have already warned of a fourth one shortly. Top U.S. infectious disease expert Dr. Anthony Fauci says getting as many people vaccinated as possible in the shortest period is the only way to avoid another disaster. To ramp up the inoculation drive, the U.S. has put Johnson & Johnson in charge of a plant that ruined 15 million vaccine doses. The country has also stopped the facility from producing the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. Down south, Latin America, however, continues to face grim realities with little reassurance. Just over a week before voters go to the polls to elect a new president, Peru reported a record number of daily deaths. Colombia is set to extend coronavirus restrictions based on intensive care unit occupancy rates.
Tenemos claro.
It's clear that the epidemiological situation in some municipalities have shown increases in recent weeks, and there also exists the risk of a new national increase in coming weeks. We must act, prevent, and take appropriate decisions.
In England, under the new plans, people will be entitled to take a rapid test twice a week to prevent outbreaks and find asymptomatic cases. Portugal, meanwhile, has extended restrictions on travel to neighboring Spain until April 15th. In Thailand, tourism-dependent Phuket Island has embarked on a mass inoculation program 2 months before the rest of the country.
On July 1st, we will open the town for tourists. If we can build immunity for 70 to 80% of the population on the island, we can receive foreign tourists who have been vaccinated without the need for quarantine.
Over in Asia, China reported its highest daily surge in over 2 months as a city in southwestern Yunnan province accounted for all the 15 new local cases.
In Pakistan, the coronavirus has claimed 43 more lives in the last 24 hours. Health officials say more than 4,300 people tested positive overnight. Nationwide, the death toll has risen to 14,821. Pakistan has reported 692,000 confirmed cases since the pandemic began. So far, nearly 616,000 people have recovered from the disease. There are more than 61,000 active cases nationwide and nearly 3,600 patients are critical. Meanwhile, thousands of Pakistanis have rushed for inoculation after the commercial sale of COVID-19 vaccines began. The officials at vaccination sites in the southern city of Karachi said the vaccines were already sold out. In another development, President Arif Alvi is chairing a virtual meeting regarding the SOPs during Ramadan. China has warned the United States not to take a superior position and presume it has a final say on global affairs. Foreign Minister Wang Yi says the door for dialogue is open, but it must be based on equality and mutual respect. In an interview, Wang said Beijing will not accept any unilateral demands from Washington. Wang said China will not accept a single nation having a final say on world affairs. He added China will take confrontation calmly without any fear if the U.S. continues on that road. Beijing's top diplomat reiterated China's right to defend its national sovereignty and dignity. In Myanmar, pro-democracy activists are holding more demonstrations today after killing of 6 protesters at the weekend. So far, more than 550 people have been killed by security forces since the February 1st coup. The protesters demanded the restoration of Aung San Suu Kyi government despite crackdowns on their Spring Revolution. They urged coordinated nationwide dissent to recognize ethnic minority armies backing the anti-coup movement. Earlier, tens of the rebel armies have threatened to back protests if the violence does not stop. But minorities on the borders face new fears amid varying insecurity as conflicts between the army and guerrillas flare anew. The death toll from flash floods and landslides in Indonesia and East Timor has topped 70. Disaster officials reported 55 fatalities and 40 missing people in Indonesia's East Nusa Tenggara province. They said thousands have been displaced after their houses were swept away or buried under. The Meteorological Office has warned that more heavy rain is likely to hit the region today. Meanwhile, the cyclone has claimed 21 lives in neighboring East Timor. Officials said more than 1,500 people have been evacuated to shelters in the capital, Dili. In Bangladesh, at least 6 people have died and several others are missing after a ferry sank in the Shitlaksaya River near Dhaka. Police say the ship was en route to Munshiganj from Narayanganj when it collided with a cargo vessel. Officials say the ferry was carrying around 50 passengers. They say some passengers managed to swim ashore while a rescue operation for those missing is underway. The passengers were traveling to their hometown after the government announced a new COVID-19 lockdown. The European Union has expressed serious worries over Russian troops' movement along the Ukrainian border. The bloc has also pledged its unwavering support for Ukraine's government. EU Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell voiced his support for Kyiv after a phone call with Ukraine's Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba. Borrell also said he will hold further talks on the issue with Kyiv's top diplomat and foreign ministers from the EU's 27 nations. The Kremlin did not deny the recent troop movements but said that Moscow was not threatening anyone. The military build-up by Russia along the Ukraine border has sparked global concerns over a possible all-out armed conflict. The European Union has termed the departure of all foreign fighters from Libya as a precondition to the country's stability. European Council President Charles Michel urged Libyan factions to seize the unique opportunity to build a sovereign and stable country. Michel made the remarks after meeting with Libya's Prime Minister-designate Abdulhamid Dbeibeh in Tripoli. The Council's president said the European Union actively supports the process of national reconciliation in Libya. He also pledged bloc support for Libya in the areas of economic recovery, elections, and fight against illegal immigration. The foreign ministers of France, Germany, and Italy have also visited Tripoli recently in a show of support for Libya's newly formed unity government. Israeli authorities have jailed 230 Palestinian children since the beginning of this year. In a report released on local Children's Day, the Palestinian Prison Society said the arrests were concentrated in the occupied city of Jerusalem. The Palestinian Children's Day is celebrated on April 5th to raise awareness on the plight of Palestinian children. The rights group that monitors the conditions of detainees in Israeli prisons said the imprisoned children are subjected to various forms of abuse. It said the misconduct includes denying food and drink for long hours, verbal abuse, and detainment under harsh conditions. Meanwhile, Defense for Children International said 85% of children arrested last year suffered physical violence. Palestine's election board has approved a list of 36 candidates to run in the legislative election scheduled for May. The vote is part of an effort by the Palestinian movements Fatah and Hamas to boost international support for governors. President Mahmoud Abbas' Fatah dominates the Palestinian Authority in the Israeli-occupied West Bank. Meanwhile, Hamas has run the Israeli blockaded Gaza Strip since 2007. The first parliamentary polls in 15 years will be held on July 31st. Kosovo's parliament has elected law professor Vjosa Osmani as a new president. She received 71 votes in the third and final round of voting at the Kosovo Assembly. The 38-year-old was approved by parliament after being proposed by Prime Minister Albin Kurti's ruling party. The position of the president became vacant in November, following Hashim Thaji's resignation after being charged with war crimes. Osmani served as acting president for 5 months as Thaji faced an indictment at the Kosovo Specialist Chambers in The Hague. In Bulgaria, exit polls suggest long-serving Prime Minister Boyko Borisov has won the general elections. He will now face complex coalition talks to secure another 4-year mandate in the poorest EU member state. Exit polls showed Borisov's centre-right GERB will be the largest party in parliament. It won around 25% of the vote compared with the 33% it won 4 years ago. Borisov has few national coalition partners in a fragmented legislature, with the most rejecting cooperation with GERB. This means Bulgaria may have difficulty tapping the EU's $884 billion recovery fund to help rebuild economies. More news stories coming up after the short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. In Taiwan, Transport Minister Lin Chia-lung has offered to resign days after a train crash claimed 51 lives. In a statement on his Facebook page, Lin said he would step down once the initial rescue work had come to an end. He added that he took full responsibility for the incident. Meanwhile, rescuers are trying to retrieve the last body of a passenger from the wreckage. The train was carrying almost 500 passengers when it slammed into a truck near the eastern city of Hualien. Life will never be the same for people in Mozambique's Palma city following the deadly insurgent attacks. Trials and tribulations await the 1,200 survivors who arrived on a boat to Pemba city. But NGOs have cast doubts about the city's capacity to embrace such a large influx of people. Details in the following report.
The terrorist attack on Mozambique's Palma city has displaced tens of thousands more who scattered into the surrounding bush or to the beach to try to catch boats. As the attack survivors swarmed the makeshift camp in a sports hall in the Pemba city, aid organization Caritas raised concerns about the rise in crime and exposure of people to COVID-19.
The city of Pemba and the infrastructure will not support the number of inhabitants. The city was prepared to accommodate a certain number of people, but now we have a lot of people. For example, now in the market there's lots of people. They are exposed to and can be contaminated by COVID-19.
Besides the sports hall, people are cramming into schools, hotel rooms, and temporary shelters. The aid workers say the rising population is putting pressure on food and water supplies, as well as healthcare and other services.
What we do is we are contacting our partners for help in funds so that we can assist the displaced people with food. When the center closes, we have to continue to distribute food to those displaced families every month. to reinforce the works of World Food Programme because they alone are not taking control of the situation.
The district where Palma is located is adjacent to natural gas projects worth $60 billion. Insurgents' attacks have been increasingly active in the surrounding province of Cabo Delgado since 2017.
Environmental degradation is undoubtedly the most threatening global challenge of the coming years. An Indonesian environmental activist has taken up the task to prepare coming generations for this challenge using puppet stories. Details in the following report.
Wearing a hat shaped as the head of the critically endangered Javan rhino and carrying a box labeled fairy tales in local language, Samsudin visits villages to teach children about environmental degradation using puppet stories. His fairy tales are particularly centered on the threat of coastal erosion and how mangrove trees can be used to counter it. The 50-year-old environmentalist has recently brought his puppet show to Indramayu, one of the areas in the country most severely affected by land erosion amid loss of mangrove swamps.
Fungsi mangrove satu adalah
one of the functions of mangroves is that it can act as a barrier to the strong waves from the ocean when it grows up. So waves will not destroy the land, as there can be a lot of damage on land caused by those big waves.
Based on the satellite images, nearly 90% of the entire 114-kilometer coastline of Indramayu has suffered from erosion. Also, around over 6,000 hectares of land is now flooded by seawater due to an encroaching shoreline. Samsudin's team of environmentalists are complementing the efforts by planting young saplings in areas which used to be covered by mangrove trees, but replanting is an uphill battle.
itu medianya itu kan harus.
The mangrove planting zone must be located in a coastal tidal area. But the coastal areas in Indramayu are rarely exposed to both high or low tides, because mostly we get high tides. And as such, it is very difficult to plant because there is no sedimentation.
As per the Peatland and Mangrove Restoration Agency, over 600,000 hectares of Indonesia's 3.3 million hectares of mangrove are in critical condition. Meanwhile, the country's forestry ministry's data shows that over 1.8 million hectares of mangroves in Indonesia were damaged.
Shares in Japan have climbed as many major Asia-Pacific markets had closed for holidays. In Japan, the Nikkei 225 rose close to 1%, while the Topix index advanced over 0.5%. South Korea's Kospi hovered above the flat line. Shares of LG Electronics also ascended over 0.5% after the firm announced it is ending mobile phone production. Now it's time to have a look at the weather update across the globe. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.